Deborah's final mission ended with blood, betrayal, and a silence that never healed. In those last hours before her retirement, she confronted Karen, then a rising officer, over a decision that abandoned teammates and buried the truth. Words were exchanged that could never be taken back. They left that mission alive, but as enemies. Deborah walked away from the teams with her integrity intact. Karen stayed and climbed. 3 years later, Karen stood as a SEAL captain, hosting an exclusive gala to celebrate the legends of the SEAL community. The message was clear. One name was intentionally erased from the list: Deborah's. When Deborah learned about the event, the insult cut deeper than any wound she carried from war. She didn't ask for an invitation, she showed up. At the entrance to the VIP lounge, security blocked her path, treating her like a stranger. Detention drew attention until the receptionist noticed the faded trident tattoo on Deborah's arm and froze. A quiet warning followed. This woman wasn't just a guest, she was one of them. Veterans in the room recognized her instantly, stepped forward, and demanded the guards stand down. Deborah walked into the gala with calm resolve, her presence alone shattering Karen's perfect night. In that moment, Deborah didn't raise her voice, she declared something far more dangerous. She wasn't there for forgiveness. She was there for justice. What followed would expose buried lies and a betrayal hidden for years. But before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Now, let's understand how this story really began. The crystal chandeliers of the Marriott Marquis in San Diego refracted warm light across polished marble floors, casting soft reflections over pressed uniforms and tailored suits. The annual Trident Gala was in full motion, an event where Naval Special Warfare's upper echelon temporarily shed operational anonymity for controlled visibility. Admirals stood beside senators, active duty operators mingled with defense contractors. Every movement in the room carried hierarchy. Outside the velvet rope marking the VIP lounge, Deborah Van stood alone. She did not scan the room, she did not fidget. Her posture was erect but relaxed, weight evenly distributed over the balls of her feet, boots planted as if the floor might shift beneath her. At 50 years old, she wore no gown, only a fitted black blazer, pressed slacks, and low-profile shoes chosen for stability, not style. Her hair was pulled tight into a utilitarian bun, the kind designed to clear peripheral vision. Her face bore lines etched by sun glare and windburn, not age. The eyes beneath those lines were still operational, alert, measuring. A private security contractor blocked her path. Early 30s, thick neck, Kevlar bulge under his jacket. His stance was casual, but territorial, shoulders squared just enough to project authority he hadn't earned. "Name's not on the list, Mom," he said, eyes flicking briefly to his tablet before dismissing her altogether. "VIP access is restricted. General admission bar is downstairs." Deborah's jaw set. A small muscle pulsed once at her temple, then went still. "Check again," she said. Her voice was low, compressed. Years of shouting over rotor wash had stripped it of softness, leaving behind a gravelly timbre that carried without effort. Deborah Vance, Master Chief, retired. The guard didn't look down. His lips tightened. "I already told you." His gaze dropped briefly, taking inventory. No medals, no gown, no visible rank. Whatever calculation he made ended in dismissal. "You're holding up the line for actual officers," he continued. "Step aside." His hand lifted, hovering inches from her shoulder. Deborah shifted her weight. It was almost imperceptible, a micro-adjustment in center of gravity, heels anchoring, knees softening. A movement drilled into muscle memory through decades of CQB training. Not aggression, readiness. She rolled back her left sleeve to check her watch. The fabric slid just enough to expose the inside of her forearm. Behind the podium, the young receptionist inhaled sharply. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. She leaned forward, eyes locking onto the faded, ink-etched tint of Deborah's skin. The trident, the eagle, the anchor. The flintlock, worn thin by time, but unmistakable. The receptionist's throat worked as she swallowed. Her hand shot out, gripping the guard's wrist with surprising force. "Stop," she'd whispered, urgency cracking her voice. "Look at her arm." The guard followed her gaze. Confusion flickered across his face, then discomfort. He opened his mouth. A voice cut through the ambient noise behind them. Top, heads turned. 3 men in dress blues moved toward the rope, their medals catching the chandelier light. Their faces were older, harder, scar tissue mapped their cheekbones. These were not ceremonial officers, these were men who had buried friends. "Master Chief Vance," one of them said, stepping forward. His brow furrowed, then lifted with recognition. "Jesus, I thought you were stateside medical." Deborah inclined her head a fraction. "Evening, sir." The man's jaw clenched as he took in the scene. His gaze slid to the guard, then back to Deborah's exposed forearm. "You're blocking the woman who pulled my team out of the quadrangle under sustained fire," he said quietly. His tone dropped, losing all warmth. "If she doesn't get through that rope, none of us are staying." The air shifted. The guard's face drained of color, his shoulders recoiled, hands retracting as if burned. He stepped back without a word. Deborah adjusted her sleeve, covering the tattoo. She did not look at him again. She passed beneath the rope, her stride measured, eyes forward. Across the lounge, Captain Karen Morrison stood surrounded by laughter and champagne flutes, her posture open, polished. She turned as Deborah approached. The smile on her face froze fractionally, but enough. For a single heartbeat, something unguarded crossed Karen's eyes, fear. Deborah stopped 3 feet from her. The music continued. Conversations resumed in forced murmurs. But the space between the two women felt sealed, isolated like the calm before a breach. Karen's grip tightened on her glass. Deborah's hands remained clasped behind her back. The war that had never ended had just walked into the room. The VIP lounge fell into an unnatural quiet, the kind that settled not from courtesy, but from instinct. Conversations thinned. Glasses stopped clinking. Even the ambient music seemed to recede, swallowed by the space now occupied by two women standing a few feet apart. Captain Karen Morrison recovered first. She rotated the stem of her wineglass between her fingers, a slow, deliberate motion meant to reassert control. Her posture remained immaculate, shoulders back, chin lifted, spine straight, but a faint tremor traveled through the liquid in her glass. Her smile returned, carefully assembled, polished to a social sheen. Only her eyes betrayed her. They darted once, quickly, toward the officers behind Deborah, then back. A flicker, fear, suppressed but not erased. "Deborah," Karen said, her tone light, almost indulgent. "I assumed you'd be retired." She let the word linger, then tilted her head slightly, in a rocking chair somewhere. "I didn't think you'd still have the energy for events like this." Deborah did not react. She stood at parade rest, hands clasped behind her back, feet shoulder-width apart. Her breathing was slow and controlled, each inhale measured, each exhale silent. Her gaze never left Karen's face. "I'm not here for the why," Deborah said. Her voice carried cleanly through the room without rising. "I'm here because you erased my team from tonight's program. You honored the command. You left out the operators who did the bleeding." A ripple passed through the crowd. Someone shifted their weight. A cough was swallowed mid-throat. The name of the operation didn't need to be spoken aloud for it to surface in every mind present. Operation Blind Sand. Yemen, 3 years earlier, a night insertion that had gone sideways. Compromised exfil, enemy movement closing fast. Karen, then a lieutenant commander, had called for a premature evacuation, citing strategic asset preservation. The call had left Deborah and 2 others pinned under sustained fire for 12 hours. Deborah had disobeyed the withdrawal timeline, re-established palms under jamming, and walked her people out alive. Karen had filed the report. Deborah had buried her career. "Management decisions," Karen replied, waving a manicured hand as if brushing away dust. Her fingers were steady now, nails immaculate. "Something you wouldn't understand, Master Chief. You were always better at pulling triggers than seeing the big picture." The corner of Deborah's mouth tightened, not into a smile, not into a frown, just enough to signal acknowledgement. "And you were always better at writing reports than leading men," Deborah said. The words landed without volume, without flourish. They didn't need either. The room shifted. Several officers, staff, planners, career climbers subtly edged closer to Karen, their bodies angled toward her, shoulders squared in quiet alignment. Across from them, the operators moved without looking at one another. A half step back, a silent repositioning. They formed behind Deborah naturally, instinctively, like muscle memory reasserting itself. A line had been drawn through the room, invisible but absolute. Karen saw it. Her jaw tightened. A small tick pulsed beneath her right eye, quickly suppressed. She could not allow this to spiral, not here, not tonight. Not in front of witnesses to matter. She stepped closer to Deborah, invading her space by inches. Her perfume cut sharp in the air. "You think you're still relevant, Vance?" Karen said, her voice lowering. The smile returned, but it was all teeth. "You think because you've got some old war stories and a faded tattoo that you're still tier 1. Her eyes swept briefly to Deborah's forearm. "The game has changed. Technology, strategy, integrated warfare. You're a dinosaur." Deborah didn't move. "Test me," she said. Karen blinked once. Then she smiled fully. "Fine," Karen replied, her voice brightening, projecting. "A war game, Operation Red Cell, next week. Coronado Kill House." She lifted her glass slightly, as if toasting the idea. "My best active duty squad against whatever geriatric friends you can scrape together. Hostage rescue scenario. Live fire standards, sim rounds, and the stakes?" Deborah asked. Karen leaned in, close enough that only those nearest could hear her clearly. Her voice dropped, precise, deliberate. "If I win," Karen said, "you will publicly admit you were negligent in Yemen. You'll clear my record, and you will surrender your trident pin to me." A breath was held somewhere in the room. The trident was not a decoration, it was identity. To surrender it was to accept erasure. Deborah's expression did not change. "And when I win?" she asked. Karen laughed, sharp and confident. "I resign," she said. "Effective immediately." Deborah extended her hand. "Prepare your resignation, Captain." Karen hesitated for half a second, just long enough for it to be noticed, then clasped Deborah's hand. Her grip was firm. Deborah's was immovable. Deborah's apartment was functional to the point of austerity. No photographs, no decorations, just clean lines and negative space. Against one wall, a narrow rack displayed medals and ribbons arranged with regulation precision. The metal caught the light from the window, but Deborah never looked at them. Not once. The dining table had been repurposed into a planning surface. Topographical maps were spread edge to edge, corners weighted with spent brass and folding knives. Elevation lines intersected with grease pencil markings, ingress routes, choke points, dead space. At the center of it all sat her phone, face up, speaker engaged. Static crackled, then a voice cut through. "You know she's going to rig it. Top, Miller." The cadence hadn't changed. Slower, maybe, deeper, but still sharp. "She runs the facility," he continued. "Karen controls the environment, lighting, sensors, scenario injects. Every variable that matters." Deborah sat at the table, her sidearm field stripped in front of her. She ran a bore brush through the barrel with smooth, economical strokes. Her hands moved from memory, not thought. "Oil, inspect, reassemble." "I know," she said. She seated the sly, checked the action, then wiped her hands on the cloth already darkened with carbon residue. "That's why I'm not calling the young guys," she went on. "I need the old guard. I need men who learn to navigate with a map, a compass, and dead reckoning. Men who don't panic when the screen goes black." There was a pause on the line. A breath drawn, released. "You're talking about ghosts," Miller said quietly. Deborah didn't answer. She didn't need to. By morning, they came. One by one, trucks pulled up outside her small home. Doors opened slower than they used to, knees stiffened. Shoulders rolled to settle old injuries, for men stepped inside, gray beards trimmed short, reading glasses hanging from shirt collars, hands scarred and thickened by decades of work. They greeted Deborah with nods, not words. A clasped forearm, a brief squeeze of the shoulder. The kind of greetings forged under fire. To a civilian eye, they looked unremarkable, retired, softened by time. But beneath the casual clothing were bodies conditioned by thousands of hours of repetition. Their eyes tracked corners automatically. Their backs never fully faced a doorway. They didn't waste time. Blueprints of the Coronado Kill House replaced the maps on the table. Concrete walls. Narrow hallways, interlocking rooms designed to punish hesitation. They studied load-bearing structures, ceiling voids, subfloor access. Fingers traced likely fatal funnels. Someone marked ventilation shafts with a pen, tapping twice, then circling them. They spoke little. When they did, It was precise. Angles here favor the defender, echo here will bleed nose upstairs. Stacking here gets you killed. 3 days passed like that. On the third night, Deborah's phone vibrated once. A text, no name, just a location and a file attachment. She opened it. Specifications, addendums, unauthorized modifications. Motion sensors layered into door frames, thermal drone swarms with autonomous routing. Facial recognition cameras slaved to a central AI node. The scenario had been rewritten from a rescue to a spectacle. Karen's fingerprints were all over it. Deborah passed the phone to Miller. He scanned the specs, jaw tightening, lips pulling thin. She's turning it into a video game, he muttered. Stacked for people who grew up behind screens, he exhaled sharply through his nose. We can't hack this, we don't have the hardware. Deborah leaned over the table, placing 2 fingers on the map. She tapped once, then again. We don't need to hack it, she said. Miller looked up. Then what? She met his eyes. We're going to do something Karen forgot how to do. A beat passed. What's that? Deborah's finger slid off the edge of the blueprint, tracing an unseen line downward. We're going to get dirty. The day of the exercise arrived clear and cold. The observation deck overlooking the kill house was packed. Admirals, evaluators, legal observers. Karen stood behind the bulletproof glass, arms crossed, posture rigid. Her jaw was set, her eyes flicked between monitors, watching feeds populate. Team Alpha assembled below, encased in the latest gear power, exoskeleton braces, integrated HUDs, biometric overlays scrolling data across their visors. Deborah's team walked onto the tarmac without ceremony. Basic fatigues, no visible tech, analog compasses clipped to belts. Their boots were already scuffed. Karen's mouth curved into something sharp. The buzzer sounded. Team Alpha hit the front door with explosive force, breach charges flashing white on the monitors as they flooded inside. Data streaming in real time. Deborah raised one hand. Her team turned away from the door. They moved toward the storm drains. The cameras lost them almost immediately. The kill house went dark all at once, not gradually, not with warning. 1 second, emergency lighting glowed faintly along the concrete corridors. The next, it was gone, swallowed by engineered blackness. Karen Morrison had ordered the power cut from the control booth, her finger pressing the command without hesitation. She stood behind the bulletproof glass, arms folded tightly across her chest, jaw clenched just enough to whiten at the corners. She assumed night vision would decide everything. On the monitors, Team Alpha flowed through the structure like a schematic brought to life. Infrared lasers sliced through the darkness in clean, disciplined lines. Operators stacked, breached, flowed, clear. Doors came open with controlled violence, rooms turned green one by one. Their breathing data scrolled steadily across the screen, calm, aerobic, efficient. An admiral leaned forward, squinting at the display assigned to Team Bravo. It showed nothing but static overlays and empty floor plans. Where is Team Bravo? He asked. A technician adjusted his headset, fingers moving faster now. He toggled feeds, recalibrated gain, pulled up thermal overlays. His brow furrowed. They're not registering, he said. No heat signatures, no movement. It's like, he hesitated. It's like they vanished. Karen's eyes narrowed. A small muscle jumped beneath her left eye, betraying irritation she couldn't fully suppress. Check perimeter sensors, she ordered. Negative contact, Mom, the technician replied after a beat. No breaches, no exterior triggers. It's like they never entered the building. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. Inside the structure, far below the concrete floors and carefully staged corridors, Deborah moved on her elbows through black water. The drainage pipe was barely wide enough for a human body. Cold seeped through her fatigues, biting into muscle and joint. Mud coated her sleeves, her face, her hair. She welcomed it. The clay clung thick and heavy, packed into fabric seams, smeared across exposed skin. Primitive, effective, she had insisted on it. Thermal masking didn't require software, just physics. Around her, the others moved without sound. No wasted motion, no splashing, breath held, then released slowly through the nose. Above them, boots thundered and echoed, amplified by concrete and steel. Team Alpha hunted heat, heartbeats, exhalations. Deborah's team slipped beneath them. They emerged into a sub-basement crawlspace, water dripping steadily from corroded pipes. Deborah paused, listening. Her chest rose once, then settled. She keyed her mic. "Citrop," she whispered. Static, then Miller's voice, barely louder than breath. "I'm under the objective room," he said. "Directly beneath. I can hear movement." Deborah shifted her weight, pressing herself flatter against the concrete. "Go ahead." There was a pause, longer this time. "But something's wrong. Top." Her fingers tightened around the radio. "Say it, the hostage," Miller said. His voice dropped further, strained now. "It's not a dummy." Deborah's breath stopped mid-inhale. "I can hear breathing," he continued. "Uneven. Shallow. There's panic in it." A memory surface, unbidden training briefs, safety protocols, medical clearances. Live roleplayers were permitted under strict conditions. Trained adults, protective gear, medical oversight. "Describe it," Deborah said. Another pause. "It sounds like a kid," Miller said finally. "Crying, trying not to." Something cold settled behind Deborah's sternum. Sim rounds were non-lethal, by classification only. She had seen orbital fractures, collapsed lungs, retinal damage. A civilian, especially a child, had no place in a live-fire CQB environment. Karen was ruthless. This was something else. Deborah's jaw set. A vein stood out along her temple. "Change of plans," she said quietly, authority sharpening every syllable. "This isn't a game anymore. We extract the package. Priority 1. Weapons free on threats." Acknowledge clicks came back through the comms, no questions, no hesitation. Then the air changed. A faint hiss crept through the structure, almost polite. The lights never came back on. Instead, a dull pressure pressed against Deborah's chest. Her lungs instinctively pulled deeper, then stopped. Halon, the fire suppression system, dumped inert gas into the building, displacing oxygen. Vision narrowed, ears rang faintly, panic waited just beyond discipline. Deborah reached for her mask without looking, muscle memory overriding instinct. The seal hissed into place. Around her, others did the same, training from another era. Gas chambers, surprise drills, instructors who believed discomfort built survival. Above them, Team Alpha paused, their breathing data spiking momentarily as masks deploy. Below them, Deborah moved. The game had ended. The halon gas was a calculated insult. It rolled through the kill house in invisible waves, stripping oxygen from the air and forcing every operator into immediate procedural response. It wasn't about safety. It was about degradation, slowing hands, narrowing vision, amplifying fatigue. In the control booth, Karen Morrison watched the biometric feed stabilize as masks came up. Her lips curved, just slightly. "Let's see how fast they move in gas masks with arthritis," she said, her voice smooth, almost conversational. Inside the structure, Deborah felt the change in pressure before the sting in her lungs. Her hand was already moving. Mask up, seal check, 1 breath, 2. The world tunneled into rubber and glass, peripheral vision collapsed inward, just as designed. Around her, the others did the same. No verbal commands, no wasted motion. Their hands moved with the certainty of men who had done this when mistakes meant convulsions on concrete floors, and instructors who didn't call timeouts. But the gas forced them upward. The subfloor routes became traps, air thinning faster there. Deborah adjusted with a subtle tilt of her head. They climbed. The hallway outside the objective room opened into violence. The first paint round detonated against the wall beside Deborah's head with a crack like a rifle shot. Fragments splattered her visor in neon streaks. Another slammed lower, close enough that she felt the concussion through her boots. The air filled with the sharp, chemical tang of ruptured sim rounds. They had walked straight into a fatal funnel. 3 interlocking machine gun positions dominated the corridor, elevated and offset. Textbook kill zone. Karen's team had anticipated the approach, fields of fire overlapping with surgical precision. Thermal optics flared back online as the mud dried and flaked from fatigues. "We're pinned." Miller's voice cut through the comms, breath louder now, faster. "They've got thermal again. The mud's coming off." Deborah pressed herself flat against the wall, concrete biting into her shoulder. She glanced down, fingers snapping the magazine out, checking feed lips by touch. Her jaw tightened, then relaxed. "Miller," Suppress left, she said. Calm. Measured. Jensen, smoke grenades. Now, smoke won't stop thermal. Top. Jensen shot back. Already moving. It will if it's hot smoke. Deborah reached to her vest, fingers closing around a road flare. She tore it free with her teeth, sparks hissing as magnesium ignited. Without hesitation, she taped it to a smoke canister, the adhesive biting into her glove. She rose just enough to throw. The device clattered down the corridor and detonated into chaos. White smoke billowed instantly, superheated, the flare burning at its core like a miniature sun. On Karen's monitors, thermal feeds blew out into pure white static. Targeting reticles jitter, then froze, move. Deborah surged forward, boots pounding through smoke and sparks. Shapes emerged at arm's length. The fight collapsed into contact. A younger SEAL lunged at her. Armored. Heavy. Deborah pivoted inside his center line, her elbow snapping into his wrist. She felt the joint give, heard the grunt sucked back into his mass. She hooked his knee, used his momentum, and sent him into the wall hard enough to rattle teeth. To paint rounds to the chest, kill to her left, Miller slammed into another operator, forearm across throat, twisting, using leverage instead of strength. Bodies collided, slipped, fell, paint splattered everything, walls, visors, hands shaking from exertion. Deborah's breath came steady, controlled, each exhale fogging her visor for a fraction of a second. She pushed through it. They reached the steel door. Deborah knelt, hands moving automatically as she placed the breaching charge. Tape, primer, step back. Her fist clenched once, then opened. Stand by. The detonation was concussive, the door folding inward with a scream of tortured metal. Deborah flowed through the breach, weapon out, muzzle tracking. She stopped, time compressed. The man tied to the chair lifted his head slowly. His face was thinner than she remembered, skin drawn tight over bone. His legs were useless, folded beneath him, restraints biting into muscle that no longer obey. A wheelchair sat just out of reach, deliberate. Sergeant Gomez, the man Karen had abandoned in Yemen. The man Deborah had dragged out under fire. The man whose spine had paid the price. His eyes found hers. Recognition flickered there, then something like shame. Deborah's finger went rigid on the trigger guard. Her chest locked, breath trapped halfway in. A tremor passed through her hand before she forced it still. This wasn't strategy. It was psychological warfare, executed with surgical cruelty. And in the control booth, Karen Morrison watched the feat, her smile finally slipping as the past walked back into the room. The sight of Gomez bound to the chair hit Deborah like a concussive wave. The man's shoulders were drawn tight despite the restraints, breath hitching behind the gag in uneven pulls that fogged the plastic shield taped over his mouth. His eyes flicked to her and locked there, pupils blown wide, a faint tremor running through his jaw as if his teeth were chattering. The wheelchair had been stripped away, metal cuffs bit into his wrists, the skin beneath already bruising to a deep, unhealthy violet. Check him for traps, Deborah said, her voice level, weapon steady, muzzle tracking the doorway with small, precise corrections. The muscles along her forearm stood out like corded steel, a subtle tremor arrested by discipline rather than calm. Miller slid in low, boots whispering over concrete. He didn't touch Gomez at first. He leaned close, eyes scanning seams, wires, the unnatural bulge beneath the chair legs. His brow creased once, sharply, then smoothed as he reached under with two fingers. He froze, the tick at the corner of his eye betrayed him before his voice did. Top, he said quietly. Pressure plate under the chair, weighted. If we lift him, he made a soft clicking sound with his tongue. Boom. And there's more. He followed a braided cable up to the vest strap tied around Gomez's chest. Live transponder. It's slave to the building charges. If this goes hot, the system calls a structural failure. Deborah's jaw set. She tapped her earpiece once, twice, as if the motion alone could anchor her restraint. Control. This is Bravo. Hostage located and secure. Requesting immediate extract. Static hissed. Then Karen's voice slid through, sweetened with contempt. Negative. Bravo. Updated intel says the objective is rigged. You have 3 minutes to solve the problem and extract, or the building collapses. A pause, deliberate. And Deborah, the solution was in the briefing packet I sent you. Oh, didn't you get it? Deborah didn't answer. Her eyes moved to the timer pulsing on the vest, red numerals counting down with a soft, predatory beep. Karen had never sent the code. The realization landed without drama, a cold certainty. This was not a test of tactics, it was a spectacle. Gomez's chest hitched harder, his shoulders shook. The memory of Yemen sat between them without words. The dust, the blood, the screaming radio. Deborah holstered her weapon and dropped to one knee in front of him. The concrete was cold through her pants. She reached up and placed two fingers lightly on his forearm, grounding, deliberate. "Hey," she said, her voice pitched low, familiar. "Look at me. Same as Yemen, I'm here." His breathing slowed by a fraction, enough to matter. Tears streaked down the grime on his cheeks, catching in the edge of the gag. Deborah leaned in to study the device. Digital interface, redundant triggers, clean work. To clean, she tracked the wiring path with her eyes, mapping it in 3 dimensions, already knowing the answer before Miller spoke. "We can't disarm it," he said. Sweat traced a line down his temple, stopping at the corner of his mouth. "Not without the code." Deborah's gaze dropped to the floor-reinforced concrete, poured thick, spiderwebbed with rebar. Her lips pressed together, then eased. "We don't disarm it," she said. "We change the geometry." Miller blinked. "Top." "We're on the 2nd deck," she said, voice steady. "We take the floor with us. The plate triggers on loss of pressure. If gravity keeps the load constant, it won't register release until impact." A breath escaped Miller that was half laugh, half prayer. "That's insane." Deborah met his eyes. There was no smile there. "Set charges," she said. "Controlled implosion. Tight ring, we drop clean." Miller nodded once and moved. The timer kept ticking. Deborah kept her hand on Gomez's arm until the last possible second. Her posture relaxed, her eyes unblinking, holding him in place with nothing but certainty. The observation deck held its breath. Monitors glowed against the glass, bathing the assembled brass in sterile blue light. On the central screen, the countdown burned red. 0:45. Karen leaned forward, elbows on the console, lips curled in a thin smile that never reached her eyes. "She's not coming out," she said softly, savoring each word. "She's freezing up." The deck shuddered. Not a simulation tremor, this was deep, violent, physical. The glass vibrated with a low, rolling concussion. A bloom of gray dust erupted from the first-floor windows, belching outward in a choking cloud that swallowed the exterior cameras. "What was that?" the Admiral snapped, spine straightening, knuckles whitening on the rail. "Did the simulation detonate?" A technician's fingers flew across the keyboard, then stalled. His mouth opened, closed. "No, sir. The signature doesn't match a scenario charge." He swallowed. The blast vector came from inside. "Structural failure on floor 2. Karen's smile faltered, just for a heartbeat. Her jaw tightened, a faint pulse flickering at her temple. Inside the building, the world rang hollow. Deborah lay half-buried beneath gypsum and splintered stouts, lungs burning as she dragged in air that tasted like chalk and cordite. Her ribs screamed when she rolled, but she forced her weight onto her elbows and shoved a slab of drywall off her legs. The impact had driven the breath from her, a sharp, white pain blooming down her spine, but her hands were already searching, counting heads by instinct. "Status," she rasped, coughing dust from her throat. "Green." Miller's voice cut through the haze, strained but steady. He was on one knee beside the epicenter, hands braced on rubble. "Gomez is clear." Deborah's vision sharpened. In the center of the debris field, the chair still stood miraculous and wrong. The legs were shattered, metal twisted like snapped bone, but the seat remained level, the pressure plate taped firmly beneath it. Gomez sat rigid, eyes squeezed shut, shoulders locked. A tremor ran through his hands, but the mechanism held. Deborah pushed herself upright and crossed the wreckage in 3 strides. She crouched, eyes flicking from the timer to the plate, then to Miller. A heavy chunk of concrete lay nearby, jagged and dense. "Hold pressure," she said. Miller slid the slab beneath the seat, easing it up millimeter by millimeter until the weight transferred. The timer continued its steady pulse, no change. Deborah's breath escaped through her nose, controlled, quiet. They cut Gomez loose. The cuffs fell away with dull clinks, leaving angry welts on his wrists. Deborah kept one hand on his knee, anchoring him as Miller and Jensen maneuvered the wheelchair into position, movement slow and deliberate, like surgeons working around a live artery. Exits blocked, Jensen called from the hallway, peering through a wall of collapsed concrete and rebar. His jaw tightened as he tugged once, then twice, the obstruction unmoving, no clear path. Deborah's eyes tracked to the far side of the room. Sunlight spilled through a shattered window, dust motes hanging in the beam like suspended sparks. Beyond it, the open field, exposure, risk. The window, she said, already moving. We go out the window. Miller's head snapped up. Sniper overwatch on the exits, Alpha's covering the field. Deborah stopped, her shoulders squared. She reached out, palm open. Give me the radio. Miller hesitated a fraction of a second, then pressed it into her hand. Deborah switched channels, not the exercise net, not control. Public address. Her thumb hovered, then pressed. Her voice filled the complex, amplifying and unavoidable, cutting through the chaos with calm authority. Attention all stations, this is Master Chief Vance. She paused, letting the name settle. We have a non-combatant evacuee, Sergeant Antonio Gomez, wounded veteran. If any hostile element fires on a wounded brother, you are violating the SEAL ethos. Stand down. In the control booth, Karen jerked upright, chair scraping hard against the floor. Cut that transmission, she shouted, slamming a fist against the console. That's an unauthorized broadcast, out on the field. The effect was immediate. Sniper reticle steadied on Deborah's chest as she kicked the remaining door wide and rolled Gomez forward into the light. The lasers trembled, red dots quivering against her sternum, her shoulder, the wheel rim. Deborah didn't flinch. Her grip on the wheelchair was firm, knuckles pale, her posture unyielding. She kept her eyes forward, chin level, every step measure. One laser blinked out, then another, rifles lowered, muzzles dipping toward the grass. In the tower, a young sniper swallowed hard, jaw working as he disengaged his optic. On the ground, Team Alpha's leader tore the headset from his ear and hurled it aside, the plastic cracking as it hit the dirt. Engage! Karen screamed into her mic, voice shrill with fury. I said engage. That is an order. No one moved. The Alpha leader stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel. He straightened, shoulders back, and raised his hand in a crisp salute as Deborah passed. She met his eyes for half a second, long enough to see the decision there. The line he would not cross, then continued on. Wheels rolling steady, sunlight washing over them both. Behind her, the countdown hit 0. The screen went dark. Deborah didn't slow as she crossed the tarmac. The wheels of Gomez's chair left thin tracks through the dust, the sound steady, deliberate. Heads turned as she approached the observation tower. Conversations died mid-sentence. A Marine at the door hesitated, hand hovering near the handle, then stepped aside without a word. She pushed straight into the control room. The air inside was cold and recycled, humming with servers and cooling fans. Karen stood at the central console, fingers flying across the keyboard, jaw clenched so tightly the muscle along her cheek twitched. Lines of code scrolled on the monitor's override commands, scoring parameters, post-event flags. She was trying to rewrite the outcome while it was still warm. Deborah looked like she'd come out of a collapse zone. Gray dust streaked her face, where sweat had cut paths through it. Wet clay clung to her sleeves and collar. Her breathing was controlled but deep, the kind that followed trauma once adrenaline began to bleed off. She stopped inches from Karen's console. Game over, Karen, Deborah said. Karen spun around. Her chair skidded back, metal legs shrieking against the floor. You cheated, she shouted, voice sharp and brittle. You destroyed government property. You violated the exercise parameters. This entire evolution is invalid. Deborah didn't react. Her eyes flicked once to the screen, then back to Karen's face. The parameter was to save the hostage. A shadow fell across the room as the Admiral stepped forward. His expression was carved from stone, lips pressed thin, eyes fixed on Karen with a kind of quiet disappointment that carried more weight than anger. Captain, he said, did you place Sergeant Antonio Gomez in that building knowing his medical and psychological history? Karen opened her mouth, closed it, then lifted her chin. It was a controlled stress test, she snapped, with an acceptable training risk. I needed to demonstrate that Master Chief Vance operates outside command intent. The Admiral didn't blink. Did you deliberately withhold the abstraction code from Bravo team? Karen's fingers curled into fists. I needed to see how she reacted under pressure. Reckless operators improvise. They break doctrine. Reckless. The word came from the chair. Gomez had been silent until now, hands gripping the armrests so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His voice shook, but it carried. Every syllable landed. She saved me, he said. Again, Karen's eyes snapped to him. You shouldn't be speaking, she said quickly. You've been through it. Just like Yemen, Gomez continued, breath hitching. His chest rose and fell unevenly, but he didn't stop. She didn't leave. She stayed. You left. The room went still. Even the hum of the servers seemed to recede. The Admiral turned slowly toward Gomez. What did you say, Sergeant? Gomez lifted a trembling hand and pointed at Karen. His finger wavered but didn't fall. Yemen, she ordered the evacuation. Then she ordered comms cut. We were calling for help. You didn't want to hear it. You wanted the op closed to protect your timeline. Karen's face drained of color. A faint sheen of sweat appeared at her hairline. That's not true, she said. Too fast, he's confused. PTSD can distort. I was there, Deborah said quietly. Karen swung back toward her. You're manipulating him. Deborah reached into the cargo pocket of her pants. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She withdrew a small ruggedized data drive, scarred and blackened along one edge. She held it between two fingers, not like evidence but like something she'd carried for a long time. I recovered this from the wreckage, Deborah said. 3 years ago, comms buffer from the relay unit you abandoned. Karen shook her head, a sharp, almost imperceptible motion. That equipment was destroyed. It wasn't, Deborah replied, just buried. She met the Admiral's eyes now. There was no triumph there. Only resolve and something older, heavier. I never released it. I didn't want the Navy dragged through a public inquiry. I didn't want families hearing their last calls on the evening news. Her gaze returned to Karen. But today, you turned a training exercise into psychological warfare. You used a wounded veteran as a prop. You forced my hand. She extended the drive. The Admiral took it. His thumb brushed the scarred casing, then closed around it. He didn't look at Karen when he spoke. Captain, you are relieved pending investigation. NCIS will take custody of all training records, communications logs, and personnel files related to Yemen and today's exercise. Karen's lips parted, no sound came out. Her shoulders sagged a fraction, then squared again, defiance flickering weakly behind her eyes. 2 officers stepped in behind her. Deborah exhaled slowly. Her hand rested on the back of Gomez's chair, steadying him as his grip finally loosened. The Admiral seated himself at the main console without ceremony. He didn't ask for permission. The room seemed to contract around the simple motion as he slid the ruggedized drive into the port. A technician instinctively reached forward, then stopped, hands hovering, unsure whether to intervene. The Admiral raised one finger. The technician stepped back, a soft click, then static. The speakers crackled, struggling to buffer sound pulled from 3 years ago, from dust and heat and chaos. The first voice that emerged was unmistakable, Karen Morrison. Younger, sharper, breathless but already edged with impatience. Cut the feed, the recording said. Paper rustled in the background. A helicopter rotor bled faintly into the channel. I don't want to hear it. Mark them Mia and get the bird in the air. We are leaving. A few officers shifted their weight. One hand went to a jaw, thumb pressing hard enough to blanch the skin. Gunfire erupted through the speakers. Not simulated. Real. Close. Automatic fire echoing off concrete and stone. Then Deborah's voice cut through it. Steady. Unhurried. Controlled in a way that only came from discipline forged under pressure. Negative. Command. I am not leaving my men. I am going back. The recording ended abruptly, severed by a burst of static that lingered like smoke. No one spoke. Karen took a step back. Her heels struck the wall behind her with a dull thud. She hadn't realized how close she'd drifted to it. Her mouth opened, then closed. The tick at the corner of her eye returned. Faster now, her breathing shallow and uneven. That audio is out of context, she said finally, voice thin. You can't. The Admiral stood. His chair scraped against the floor, the sound sharp enough to make several heads turn. He faced her fully now, shoulders squared. posture rigid with controlled authority. "Captain Morrison," he said, each word measured, precise. "You will remain silent." Karen swallowed. Her throat worked, but she nodded once, stiffly. The Admiral turned to the room. Senior officers, commanders, analysts, men and women who had built careers on reputation and restraint. Their expressions were no longer neutral. Disgust had a weight to it, and it hung heavy in the air. "You deliberately abandoned personnel under fire," the Admiral continued. "You suppressed distress communications to expedite extraction. You falsified reporting to advance your career. And today, you escalated that misconduct by endangering a wounded veteran during a live training evolution." Karen's hands clenched at her sides. Her fingers trembled, then stilled as she forced them flat against her thighs. "Captain Morrison," the Admiral said, voice dropping to something colder. "You are relieved of command. Effective immediately. You will face court-martial proceedings for dereliction of duty, falsification of records, and reckless endangerment of personnel." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Military police," he added, without turning. "Escort the captain out." Two MPs stepped forward in unison. Their boots hit the floor with a synchronized finality. One reached for Karen's shoulder. The other peeled the Velcro rank patch from her sleeve. The ripping sound was loud in the silence. Karen didn't resist. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. Her eyes were locked on Deborah. There was a flicker there, something like disbelief, then calculation, then a hollow realization of inevitability. Her career, every promotion, every calculated smile, collapsing inward on itself. As the MPS took her by the arms and turned her toward the exit, Karen twisted just enough to look back one last time. Deborah stood beside Gomez's chair. Her hand rested on his shoulder, not gripping, not possessive, just present. Gomez's breathing had steadied, his shoulders no longer hunched as if bracing for impact that never came. Deborah didn't smile. She didn't look away, either. She met Karen's gaze and inclined her head once, slow, deliberate. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't triumph. It was acknowledgement of truth finally spoken, of justice finally applied. The door closed behind Karen with a muted thump. Only then did the room begin to breathe again. The bar sat a few miles off the main road, tucked between a shuttered bait shop and a cinderblock gym with faded unit stickers peeling off the windows. Inside, the light was low and amber, filtered through years of cigarette smoke that never quite left the wood. The floor was dusted with sawdust to soak spilled beer. Old country music played softly from a jukebox no one bothered to fix. This was not a place for speeches or medals. It was a place where men and women came to exhale. Deborah sat in a cracked vinyl booth, her back to the wall by instinct, one boot hooked casually around the run of the table leg. Her jacket was off, sleeves rolled, the trident tattoo on her forearm visible in the dim light. The lines around her eyes softened when she smiled, something she hadn't done easily in years. Miller was halfway through a story that kept getting interrupted by laughter. Jensen leaned back, reading glasses perched low on his nose, shaking his head as if reliving the moment all over again. Gomez sat between them, a beer untouched in front of him, hands resting calmly on his lap. His shoulders were looser now. The rigid tension that had lived in his spine since Yemen had eased, just enough to notice. For the first time in 3 years, the past wasn't sitting at the table with them. The door opened. The room responded before anyone consciously registered who it was. Conversations dipped, chairs stilled. Deborah's eyes lifted first, her jaw tightening a fraction before easing again. The Admiral stepped inside, cap tucked under his arm. He didn't project authority. He carried it quietly, the way operators recognized immediately. He raised a hand in a small dismissive wave when a few heads instinctively straightened. The bar returned to its low murmur as he crossed the floor. He stopped at Deborah's booth. "The inquiry is complete," he said, voice low enough that only the table heard. "Captain Morrison will be dishonorably discharged." Tension revoked, full separation. Deborah lifted her beer, took a slow sip. The glass touched the table without ceremony. "Good." The Admiral nodded once. There was no satisfaction in his expression, only closure. "There's discussion at command," he continued. "Reinstatement, promotion. We need someone to run the training facility. Someone who understands that technology supports the mission but doesn't replace judgment." Deborah didn't answer immediately. Her gaze drifted across the table, to Miller's scarred knuckles, to Jensen's knee brace peeking from under his jeans, to Gomez's hand steady now, no tremor. She looked down at her own palms, the faint white lines of old fractures, burns, and healed cuts. Then her eyes settled on the trident inked into her skin, faded, earned. "With all due respect, sir," she said finally. A small smile touched her mouth, not defiant, not bitter, resolved. "I've done my time. I proved what I needed to prove. I'm not looking for another command." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a challenge coin. The metal caught the light as she rolled it once between her fingers before sliding it across the table toward him. It came to rest near his hand. "Give that to the next girl who shows up early and leaves late," Deborah said. "Tell her it's not about rank, it's about who covers your six when things go dark." The Admiral picked up the coin, weighing it in his palm. His jaw tightened briefly, then he nodded. "No argument, no pressure. That's why we asked," he said simply. He turned and walked back toward the door, the coin disappearing into his pocket. The nose of the bar slowly swelled again. Deborah leaned back, exhaling through her nose, tension bleeding out in a way that only came after a fight was truly finished. She lifted her glass. "So," she said, eyes moving around the table. "Who's buying the next round?" Miller groaned theatrically. Jensen laughed. Gomez lifted his beer at last, tapping it gently against hers. The clink of glass was soft, almost ceremonial. The camera pulls back, the booth glows warm against the dark wood. Laughter fills the space where anger once lived. The final image settles on the trident tattoo on Deborah's arm as it rests beside Gomez's steady hand, earned, unbroken, and finally at peace. If this story resonated with you, if you believe quiet professionalism still matters, subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice, integrity, and the ones who never walk away from their own.